Hello class, and welcome to your first chapter overview, Key Concepts of Medical Terminology. So we're going to start this with talking about some of the key concepts and maybe some tips and tricks that'll help you to break down medical terms. Okay. One of the things that I like to say is that medical terminology is kind of a language unto itself. So if you go back to maybe when you were in high school and you think of if you went to a school district like I did that required that you have to take at least 2 years of a foreign language like French or German or Spanish, this is kind of the same, in my opinion. Medical terminology is a language unto itself, okay? And there are some very key ways of understanding what medical terms mean. Oftentimes we have to break these things down. We have to break terms down for potential patients, right? We always tell you to speak to patients in layman's terms, which is just, very basic, right? But sometimes patients will hear certain medical terms and they'll want to know exactly what's being talked about. And part of our job is to be able to break those terms down, okay? So we're going to talk about in this chapter how we dissect these medical terms. We're going to determine, there's basically 3 main parts of a medical term and then a fourth smaller component, okay, which are the prefix, the root, the suffix, and then the combining vowel. And we're going to kind of talk about those, okay? And then maybe some tips on pronunciation, all right? So what do we do first when we're looking at a medical term? We want to analyze the word by breaking it down or dividing it into component pieces, okay? Now what that means is that we're going to look at those 3 main aspects, okay? The first one is called a root. Every medical term has a root. The root is the core component of the word, okay? And it says it holds its essential meaning and cannot stand alone as a complete term. So a good one, I think your first example here is going to be hematology. Hematology has 2 parts and a combining vowel. The root of hematology is hemat. Hemat, H-E-M-A-T, means blood. It always means blood, okay? That's a root word, okay? It's very specific to something. Root words oftentimes are pertaining to the actual body part or the organ or a component of the human body, okay? So hemat is the root in hematology. Logy, L-O-G-Y, is a suffix, and a suffix comes at the end of a word and it further defines the word, okay? And a suffix, usually a suffix is going to give you more information about the disease, the condition, or a procedure, okay? So that's typically what a suffix is. So in hematology, L-O-G-Y, logy, stands for study of. And then the combining vowel is O, hematology, H-E-M-A-T-O-L-O-G-Y, hematology, okay? So you have a root, hemat, a suffix, logy, and then the combining vowel to bring those two pieces together is the O, all right? Now, sometimes words can have a prefix or more than one prefix. And a prefix, like a suffix, further defines the word or modifies it and gives it more information. And a prefix, pre meaning before, comes at the beginning, okay? So it lies before the root, okay? And a prefix usually gives us information about things like time or timing, the quantity, or the location. So if you can remember, root is the core component part. The prefix gives us information about time, location, the quantity. And then the suffix gives us information about the disease, condition, or the procedure that's being performed, okay? So when we break down hematology, the way I like to break words down is to start at the back, start at the end, start with the suffix most of the time. So if you start with the suffix most of the time, we can define this word for people. So hematology is the study of blood. So we start at the back, we work our way back to the front. Okay? So hematology, here it is, right? One root, a suffix, combining vowel of O. Okay? The study of blood. Electrocardiogram, a little bit different. This one actually has two roots and a suffix, okay, with combining vowels, both of them being O, okay. So electrocardiogram. Electro is referring to electrical activity, okay, or electricity. Cardi is referring to the heart, and gram is to record, okay. So when we break this term down from back to front, we can define it as a record or to record the electrical activity of the heart. And then the combining vowels are O, electrocardiogram. Okay. Hypogastric. This is a good one because it has all three of the main components. It has a prefix, a root, and a suffix. Okay. So the prefix is hypo. Hypo means decreased, deficient, below. The opposite of hypo is hyper, which is increased, elevated, or above, or higher than. Okay, so in this one, hypogastric, so gastro is pertaining to stomach. Okay, and then the IC, kind of a non-specific term, a very general term, which means pertaining to. Okay, so hypogastric basically means pertaining to a region below the stomach. Okay, hypergastric would be the opposite. Okay, pertaining to a region above the stomach. So if we were to use this, maybe a provider would use this to define where a patient's pain might be. It's a little bit non-specific, but it tells us that their pain, hypogastric, they're having patient exhibits hypogastric pain. Okay, meaning that the pain is below the stomach. That's where they're feeling their pain. Okay, forming plurals. We do use, S like in, regular English language where we pluralize things with an S in a lot of cases. But in medical terms, that often isn't the case. So if we look at these examples, macula, the plural of macula being one, is maculae. Okay, we simply add an E or the AE at the end. So maculae is the plural of macula. Adenoma, adenomata is the plural of adenoma. Okay, adenoma, if you want to know, means a tumor of a gland. So an adenomata means tumor of multiple glands or more than one. Okay, we've got glomerulus and glomeruli. So a glomerulus is referring to one, glomeruli is referring to multiple. Okay, and the same thing with pelvis and pelvis. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Pronunciation. Most of you know that if it begins with a P, the P is usually silent. So something like Pseudomonas is, the P is silent and the S is pronounced. Same thing with pneumonia, right? We don't pronounce the P. It's not P pneumonia or pneumonia. It's pneumonia. The P is silent, okay? I like the G's sound like J's. That's a good one, as in gene, Gene. We pronounce it with a J. Okay, PH is often sounds like an F, as in phlegm, and so on. Okay, an eponym or eponym, depending on how you want to pronounce it, and that's important too. You will find that there may be different ways of pronouncing some of these words. Oftentimes, what I find is that usually depends on a couple of things. The region of the country that you come from. It may depend on what particular school you might have gone to and how you heard things pronounced, which I have found very common with doctors or other providers, that they may say things that, their school pronounces it this way, but a different medical school pronounces it another way. So be mindful of that. Okay, so an eponym, which is how I pronounce it, or an eponym, which is how some people pronounce it, is a medical term derived from a person's name. And most commonly, probably the most common one you'd see is maybe Alzheimer's, right? Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, but it was named after a German physician who kind of pioneered the research behind that type of dementia back in the early 1900s. And hence, because of his work around this dementia, they ultimately, to honor him, named the disease, that particular dementia disease process, Alzheimer's disease, after him. Same thing with certain procedures. Procedures could be named after people that discovered the procedure, like the Heimlich maneuver. We also name certain instruments that we use for surgical procedures. We may name those after the people that discovered or created those instruments. Okay, so that's called an eponym. Okay, we already covered this one, right? The root, the prefix, and the suffix. Okay, don't think there's anything there that we need to add. And that's it. Okay, that's your first chapter overview. And what I try to do with these chapter overviews is really just give you a kind of a brief introduction to things, maybe add a couple of things that I can add from a personal level. And then your responsibility is to read the chapter and do the homework on the chapter. And if you have any questions, of course, email me and let me know about that, or chime into my office hours via Zoom, and I'll be happy to help you with that. I'm going to try to keep these chapter overviews to about 15 to 20 minutes max. I know anything more than about 20 minutes, and everybody loses interest in it. So I'm going to try to keep them very short and very brief, just to add a little bit more to your learning of these chapters. Okay, so I look forward to seeing you for chapter 2.